Welcome to the channel. Quick, engaging, and straight to the point, that's what you'll get here. If you love content that keeps things interesting without wasting your time, hit subscribe and enjoy the ride.
8 months ago, I stood in the arrivals hall of Istanbul airport with nothing but a half-dead phone, $40 in my pocket, and a note my husband had slipped under the hotel room door while I slept. "You always said you were the smart one. Prove it." I read it 3 times before my legs gave out. I sat down on the cold marble floor right there, surrounded by strangers wheeling their luggage past me, and I thought, this cannot be real. This cannot be my life. My name is Caroline. I'm 39 years old. For 11 years, I was a wife, a business partner, and apparently, a fool. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it actually started, not Istanbul, not the hotel room, not the note. It started the way most disasters do. Quietly, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. My husband, Marcus, and I had built a financial consulting firm together from the ground up. We met in our late 20s at a conference in Chicago, fell in love over bad hotel, coffee, and arguments about interest rate projections, and spent the next decade building something real. We had 31 employees. We had clients in 4 states. We had a house in Scottsdale with a lemon tree in the backyard that I had planted myself. We also had his business partner, Derek. Derek had been Marcus's college roommate. He was the kind of man who laughed too loudly at his own jokes and always picked up the check at dinner so that everyone would notice him doing it. I never liked him, but I tolerated him because Marcus loved him like a brother, and you don't ask your husband to choose. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to suspect, was that for nearly 2 years, Marcus and Derek had been quietly restructuring the firm's finances. Moving money. Reclassifying assets. Setting up a parallel LLC that I was not a part of, had never signed documents for, and would not have recognized my own company in if I had looked at it from the outside. I was the co-founder on paper. On paper, that meant very little. The Istanbul trip was supposed to be a celebration. We had just finalized a major contract with a European investment group, and Marcus suggested we take a long weekend to mark the occasion. Just the 2 of us. I remember being touched that he wanted that real time away from Derek, from the office, from the relentless pace of everything. I packed a sundress and a novel I'd been meaning to read for 6 months, and I got on the plane feeling genuinely happy. We spent the first 2 days doing all the things tourists do. The Grand Bazaar. A sunset boat ride on the Bosphorus. A dinner where we talked about the future in the easy, warm way we used to before the business consumed everything. I thought we were finding our way back to each other. On the 3rd night, Marcus said he wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. I stayed up reading in the little sitting area of our hotel suite, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Somewhere around midnight, I fell asleep in the chair. When I woke up, the room was wrong. His suitcase was gone. His toiletries. His passport, which had been sitting on the desk, was gone. My purse was still on the table, but when I opened my banking app, our joint account showed a balance of 0. The business account I had access to had been closed. Both my credit cards declined when I tried to test them, not frozen, not flagged, just quietly maxed out over the previous 72 hours on transactions I didn't recognize. My phone was at 11%. I found the note under the door. "You always said you were the smart one. Prove it." I don't know how long I sat on that floor. Long enough for the sun to come up. Long enough for housekeeping to knock, and me to not answer. Long enough to cycle through every version of denial and bargaining that a person can cycle through before they arrive, exhausted, at the only door left open. This is real, and you have to decide what to do next. What I did not do was call the American consulate immediately, which is what I should have done. Instead, I spent the first hour trying to reach Marcus. His phone went straight to voicemail. Then, Derek. Same. Then our office manager, Lynn, who picked up on the second ring and sounded strange and clipped and told me she couldn't talk right now, and hung up before I could say anything else. That was when I understood that this was not a breakdown. This was not a crisis, he would explain when he calmed down. This was a plan that other people already knew about. I sat back down on the floor. And then something happened that I can only describe as a kind of cold clarity. The panic didn't disappear, but it moved to the back of my mind, and something else moved to the front. I had $40, 11% battery, and a brain that had been solving financial problems for 15 years. I was in Turkey, not the moon. I charged my phone at the hotel lobby outlet while pretending to wait for someone. I used the Wi-Fi to email my sister, Renee, in Denver, keeping the message short and factual. I am in Istanbul, Marcus is gone, I need help, do not tell anyone. Renee is 7 years older than me and has never once panicked in a crisis. She called me back within 4 minutes on WhatsApp. She wired me $300 through Western Union within the hour. I went to the U.S. consulate the next morning. I won't pretend that process was simple. It took 3 days to get emergency travel documentation, and those 3 days were the most humbling of my life. I stayed in a cheap hostel near Taksim Square, sharing a room with 2 Swedish backpackers who were 22 years old and very kind about not asking questions. I ate simit from street vendors and sat in the hostel common room at night, going through every memory of the last 2 years and reassembling them into the picture I should have been seeing all along. The parallel LLC. The restructured accounts. The European contract that had been signed in Marcus's name only, not mine, which I had noticed briefly and let go because he said it was a formality. None of it was a formality. On my 3rd night in the hostel, I made a decision. I was not going home to Scottsdale. Not yet. Not to the house where I would be expected to fall apart, to lawyer up, to become the abandoned wife in the divorce story. I was not going to give Marcus the version of this he had planned for the one where I came crawling back and fought for scraps of what had once been half mine. I was going to disappear first. I called Renee back and I told her what I needed. She thought I had lost my mind, which was fair. I told her I hadn't. I asked her to tell anyone who asked that I had come home and was staying with her and needed privacy. I asked her to overnight my backup passport, the one I kept in the fireproof safe at home, separate from the one Marcus had clearly anticipated taking. I had given Renee a key to the house 3 years ago for exactly this kind of emergency, though I had imagined something more like a burst pipe. While I waited, I opened my laptop which Marcus hadn't taken, possibly because he'd underestimated how much I kept on it, and I started reading everything I could find about Dubai's freelance visa program. About the financial consulting market in the UAE. About what it would take to set up as an independent contractor. I had a very specific skill set. I had 15 years of experience. I had 3 personal client relationships that were mine, not the firm's clients who had come to me specifically because of my work, not Marcus's. I had their personal contact information saved in my own email, not the company's system. I had more than he thought I had. My passport arrived on the 5th day. I booked a flight to Dubai the same afternoon. When I landed at Dubai International, I had $412, a laptop, a carry-on suitcase with 3 days of clothes, and a contact name scrawled on a hostel notepad, Dr. Farah Al-Mansouri, a woman I had met at a conference in Miami 2 years earlier who had mentioned, very casually, that she was building a financial advisory network in the Gulf region, and that if I ever wanted to consult, she would love to talk. I had not followed up at the time. I followed up now. I sent her a LinkedIn message that was possibly the most professionally composed email I have ever written in my life, given that I was sitting in a Dubai airport cafe running on 3 hours of sleep and 4 days of adrenaline. I kept it brief. I told her I was in Dubai, I was available, and I was interested in a conversation. She responded in 2 hours. She asked if I could meet Thursday. It was Monday. I found a short-term furnished apartment through a Facebook expat group 2 weeks, paid upfront in cash that Renee wired me, in a building in Jumeirah that was nothing fancy but was clean and had fast Wi-Fi and a window that looked out over a cluster of palm trees. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday preparing. I rebuilt my professional portfolio from scratch, using everything I had backed up to my personal cloud. I drafted a consulting rate sheet. I researched the 3 UAE financial regulatory bodies I would need to understand to be useful to Dr. Al-Mansouri's clients. Thursday morning, I put on the one good blazer I had packed. I have no idea why I packed it, some muscle memory of always being prepared, and I went to meet her. Dr. Al-Mansouri was not what I had expected, which is to say she was exactly what I should have expected from someone who had built a financial advisory firm before the age of 40 in one of the most competitive markets in the world. She was precise, skeptical, and very direct. She asked me why I had left my previous firm. I told her, without drama and without self-pity, that I had discovered my business partner had been restructuring assets without my knowledge, and I had made a decision to remove myself from the situation before engaging legal counsel, because I needed to establish financial stability before I could fight effectively. She looked at me for a long moment and then she said, "That is either a very smart move or a very impulsive one." I said, "I hope to demonstrate that it was the former." She hired me as a project consultant. 6 weeks, renewable, focused on 3 of her mid-sized clients who needed restructuring analysis. The pay was not what I had been making in Scottsdale. It was enough. I threw myself into the work the way I used to throw myself into everything before the business grew large enough that Marcus handled more of it and I handled less. I worked long hours. I delivered on time, and then early. At the end of the 6-week contract, Dr. Al-Mansouri offered me a renewable 12-month agreement and introduced me, at a client dinner I had not expected to be invited to, as her lead restructuring analyst. I smiled and shook hands and did not cry until I got home. Somewhere in that second month, Renee stopped being the only person who knew where I was. I had retained a divorce attorney in Arizona, a woman named Patricia, who had been recommended to me by a friend of Renee's and who communicated entirely by encrypted email at my request. Patricia was the kind of attorney who asked you once what outcome you wanted, wrote it down, and then did not ask again because she was already working toward it. What she found, over the following weeks, was worse than I had imagined, and better than I had feared. Marcus and Derek had not simply moved money. They had been falsifying revenue reports to inflate the firm's valuation in anticipation of a sale to a private equity group based in Austin. The European contract I thought we had won legitimately had been secured through a relationship Derek had built by misrepresenting our firm's assets. The Parallel LLC was structured to receive the acquisition funds while leaving our original firm, the one with my name on it, as a liability holding shell. They had been planning this for approximately 18 months. Patricia filed a complaint with the SEC on my behalf. She also filed for divorce on grounds of financial fraud, which in Arizona meant Marcus was looking at the potential forfeiture of his portion of any acquisitions made during our marriage using marital assets. The private equity deal, she told me in a call that I took sitting on my apartment floor in Dubai because my hands were shaking too much to hold the phone comfortably, was now on hold pending investigation. She also told me that Marcus had been trying to locate me, that he had called her office 3 times, that his attorney had sent 2 formal letters requesting my contact information, which she had declined to provide. "He sounds," she said, "like a man who made a plan that depended on your reaction being different from your actual reaction." I asked her what she thought he had expected. "Fear," she said. "He expected you to be afraid." I thought about that for a long time after I hung up. I thought about the note. "You always said you were the smart one. Prove it." The contempt in it. The assumption that being left with nothing in a foreign country would break something in me that couldn't be repaired. That I would come home diminished. That I would accept whatever terms he offered just to make the fear stop. I have never in my life wanted anything as quietly and completely as I wanted to prove that calculation wrong. By month 4, I had 3 independent clients of my own in addition to my contract with Dr. Al-Mansouri. One was a Jordanian family office that had been referred to me by one of her partners. One was an American tech entrepreneur who had relocated to Dubai and needed someone who understood both U.S. tax structures and UAE regulatory frameworks. The third was a former client from Scottsdale, a woman named Gloria who ran a regional logistics company who had tracked me down through a mutual professional contact because she said, simply, "I always trusted your work more than I trusted the firm." I sat with that for a while too. The divorce was finalized in month 6. Patricia negotiated a settlement that included the return of all marital assets that had been unilaterally liquidated, compensation for my stolen equity stake in the firm, and a lien on Marcus's share of any proceeds from the private equity deal, which was still under investigation. He signed everything. Patricia said he looked, in her words, like a man who had run out of options. I did not attend in person. I signed the documents in Dubai, notarized them at the U.S. consulate, and sent them back via courier. The same week the divorce was finalized, Dr. Al-Mansouri offered me an equity partnership in her firm. I went for a walk along the Dubai marina that evening. It was warm and the lights were coming on over the water, and there were families out walking and couples holding hands, and I was completely alone, and it was the first time in months that being alone felt like a choice instead of a sentence. I called Renee. "It happened," I said. "What happened?" she said, and I could hear her holding her breath. "The equity offer. The divorce. All of it." She made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and then she said, "I told you. I told you from that hostel in Istanbul that you were going to be okay. You didn't tell me that, I said. You told me I had lost my mind. Both things were true, she said. I found out about Marcus seeing me through the least dramatic channel imaginable. A LinkedIn notification. Someone had viewed my profile, a new one, professionally updated, listing my current role at the advisory firm. The account that had viewed it belonged to Derek. I watched the notification for a long moment and then I put my phone down. Within the week, I had missed calls from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to belong to Marcus's new attorney. Voicemails I did not listen to. A text from a number I had never saved but recognized immediately. The opening words were the same, careful, reasonable tone Marcus used when he wanted something. I read the first sentence. I did not read the rest. I had 94 missed calls over the following 3 weeks. I counted them once, and then stopped counting. I did not respond to any of them. Not because I was still afraid. Not because I was angry, though I had been both of those things at various points in the preceding months. I didn't respond because I had spent 8 months building something that was entirely mine, in a city where no one knew me as anyone's wife, as anyone's partner, as anyone's fool. I had built it without his money and without his contacts and without the safety net of the life we had constructed together. And I was not willing to let him back into that story, even as a footnote. The SEC investigation concluded 14 months after I filed. Marcus and Derek's private equity deal was unwound. Derek was barred from the financial services industry for 7 years. Marcus paid a substantial civil penalty and surrendered his financial advisor license. Patricia forwarded me the notice. I read it at my desk in our firm's new offices, bigger than the first ones, with a view of the city that still sometimes stops me mid-sentence, and then I set it aside and went back to the client report I was working on. There is something I want to say here, because I have had a lot of time to think about it and I think it matters. I am not going to tell you I'm grateful for what Marcus did. I'm not. What he did was cruel and deliberate, and it was designed to destroy me, and it very nearly worked in ways that I don't talk about much. The nights in the Istanbul hostel when I couldn't stop shaking. The weeks in Dubai when I couldn't afford to be sick because I had no margin for it. The moment in month 3 when I sat in a conference room before a major client presentation and thought, I cannot do this, and then did it anyway, because there was no one else. What I will tell you is that the note said prove it. And I did. I am still in Dubai. I renewed my residency visa 8 months ago. I have a 2-bedroom apartment now with a real kitchen and a balcony where I grow herbs that mostly survive. I have colleagues I trust. I have work that is mine in a way that work had not been mine in a very long time. I have Renee, who visited in the spring and spent 5 days marveling at a city she had never seen, and who, on the last night of her trip, looked at me across a dinner table with the harbor lights behind me and said, "You look like yourself again." I didn't know until she said it that I had stopped. His calls still come occasionally. Not 94 at a time anymore. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes months of silence. I have never answered a single one. I don't intend to.